Hello everyone, welcome to our program 20 Q&A with Suba TV. So with Suba TV, we always try to make your life better day by day, and 20 Q&A program is designed as such, where we meet extraordinary characters and we try to share their knowledge with us and with you just by quickly firing 20 questions today. So if you like our videos, don't forget to subscribe our channel on Suba TV on YouTube. So today we invited another extraordinary character. I can introduce her as one of the brave lady in Sri Lanka these days, and on another hand, she has been very active in politics. On top of everything, she is a specialist in environmental protection. So thank you for accepting our invitation today. Dr. Ajantha Perera, we welcome you to our program.
Thank you.
It's a privilege to have you today.
Thank you.
So let's start off with our first question.
Okay.
What is your number one passion? Is it politics or environment?
Environment for sure.
Okay, so just because that you have initiated a lot of things to protect our environment, you were called not so friendly name, the garbage queen.
Exactly.
Did you like that name?
In a way, it's justifiable, because I think when I was very young, I used to spend a lot of time walking on the garbage piles, because I really wanted to find a solution for the garbage issue in Sri Lanka. So through that only I found the recycling program. So I think people always saw me when they saw me on TV, or whether it was on a radio program or on newspaper, they always saw me kind of linked to the garbage issue. So very often they used to say, when on TV they show a pile of garbage, they were sure that it was going to be me that they're going to interview. So yeah, I got the nickname of garbage queen, and I think I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, so let's talk about education. Education is very important thing in all of our lives. So you have completed your tertiary education and secondary education in the UK and Germany, and also your kids have followed you. Does that mean Sri Lankan education system is not capable?
That's a good question. No, because I think my father was in the foreign service, so we were in India for a couple of years, and then my father got stationed to England. He was in London in the embassy, so we didn't have much of a choice. We had to go to India, we had to go to England, and that was the age that I was still schooling. So I did my A-level in England, and then I proceeded to Sheffield University in England. So it was just a matter of, and then after I got my first degree from England, when I came back to Sri Lanka, and I worked for a little while in the university, and then I kind of felt, it's better to continue with that European education, because in a way that your brain is set to think that way. So I did my master's and my PhD in Germany, and then further studies in America. So I continued on that line. My children, of course, they decided it for themselves, because I think when I was in Sri Lanka, after I have come back with my first degree, I had some issues in the university. The people here in Sri Lanka, something that I felt was that they don't accept someone coming from outside to serve their mother nation. I think it still exists. When they have studied abroad and when they come back, people who have studied here in Sri Lanka, they have a feeling that, they are a little bit snobbish. But we were not. So I had a huge problem in Sri Lanka when I came back and I was working in the university. There were some, professors who felt that kind of like I was going out of my way to do things, like I was going to the garbage piles, I was trying to do a recycling program, and they couldn't understand why I was so busy. And during that time, my children actually saw the struggle that I was going through. And they felt that they did not want to go to a university here in Sri Lanka. They got qualified from A-level to study here in Sri Lanka. But I think they were hurt in a way when they were very young, seeing their mom being treated in a very, in their little eyes, in a hurtful way. So they wanted to go out. And then the second reason is just like the young people today, what they feel is the experience outside gives them a little bit of a maturity. You know, when you go abroad, when you study abroad, it helps you to understand a different culture and it strengthens you. So I think that there are these factors that played a role for them to go out of Sri Lanka. But they had their schooling here in Sri Lanka and they are still very attached to their schools. So
yeah, so let's talk about an average Sri Lankan woman. So we all have, as ladies, as women, we all have to play a huge role, sometimes as a mother, sometimes as a sister, sometimes as a daughter. So are you satisfied with the role that they are playing to protect the environment as women?
there could be more being done actually, because I think at the moment, if I take a simple example, I started off my recycling program in 1993, and one of the major issues that I talked about was primarily the harmful effect of the shopping bag, the thin plastic bag, what we call the silly bag. It has got the right name, silly. Because I always say only silly people carry silly bags. And I ran that campaign for a long time, and then I actually got women to make cloth bags, so that it becomes a fashion to carry a cloth bag, and it is a fashion all over the world. But in Sri Lanka, I still find when you go to the supermarket, they give a lot of plastic bags, and people like that as well. They never say no to it. I mean, few people do, and I've seen few people who actually bring their own bag from home. But the fact that they've got addicted to this silly bag and they have not given up on that. So I feel that they have really not understood the value of the environment. And if you really look at it today, even in the government sector, how much, how many people are trying to cut down the forest. They're not protecting the forest cover or the wetlands. So I have a feeling we have a long way to go. Only one day, when we have very little water to drink, and when we have less of food, and when we see how the climate change is going to affect us, I'm sure they are going to think differently. But right now, I think there's still more work to be done, because the change has to happen in the mind, and it has not happened yet.
And also in terms of politics, now we see a lot of women who are actively involved in politics, and also they have got different opportunities to make their voices heard. But do you think, is that enough for us to voice out our concerns through them? Do they speak out as required?
No, I don't think so. I think most of the women I see in the parliament who are women, they talk very little. I have a feeling, as a woman, you have the ability to think through very well. You have a very intelligent mind. And as a mother and a wife, I think you learn a lot how to take care of your economics, you know how to take care of your family, you know how to manage. And I think as a woman, you have a whole heap of experiences. But even with those experiences, I find the women in the parliament, they say very little. And also, the women in the parliament, they don't play that role of trying to get more women to come into the parliament. The amount of advocacy or the amount of role that they play in order to encourage the woman out there at the grassroots level to come to Pradesh Sabha or even to the parliament is so little. I'll give you a very simple example. We do not still have an act that would protect the women's rights. And I think the Ministry for Women's Affairs, which was there for a long time, has actually written it out. They have actually prepared it. But they have never got it approved by the cabinet. So it's still lingering. They have not got their own act approved. So which means the protection that the women should go through in Sri Lanka as a whole is not taken care in the parliament. So I feel in a way that the women in the, I mean, right now also we don't even have a ministry for women's affairs. But how many women in the parliament are actually urging, or how many are really pushing that the Ministry for Women's Affairs would actually come through? So we don't have that.
And also you have marked a significant presence in women leadership in Sri Lanka, because after 20 years since Mrs. Bandaranayake ran as a presidential candidate, you were the first lady who ran for such position in 2019.
19,
Yes.
yeah.
So if you were given the opportunity, luckily, to become the president of Sri Lanka, what would you have done differently than this government?
Very easy. I think I would have made a fabulous president. We wouldn't have any of these issues, what we are going through right now. Number one, the reason being an environmentalist. I would never have, or an environmental scientist, I would never have pushed for compost on a very immediate, kind of like, thinking that you want to convert the whole agriculture into organic farming. You can't do that. Basic reason being that the soil is so used to the pesticides, used to the other agrochemicals, and you can't just expect the farmer to switch to organic farming. Now, this is exactly what happened. Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa has absolute zero knowledge on environment, or he has zero knowledge on agriculture. So what he did was, he thought, of course, in the world you talk about organic farming, right? And you want to have organic food and it's healthy. So what he felt was, okay, I also want to do that. But he didn't realize it takes a long time. In fact, I have myself run research in Aralaganvilla in paddy fields using compost, and I have actually proven that you can actually get a better yield. But you can't do it on a very haphazard manner, because the farmers would suffer. And not only the farmers would suffer, it's a matter of, if you push for compost to be used by the farmers, and suppose suddenly that there is a very small yield, people would not be able to be fed with vegetables and fruits in Sri Lanka. So that was a big risk, and he took that risk. He didn't listen to anyone. So in that sense, I would never have made that mistake. So I'm sure that we would be self-sufficient in food in Sri Lanka. Second one is that I would have done differently from Mr. Gotabaya is, I would have really gone for industrialization. I would have really built more industries. I would have given jobs for younger people, because having two young people at home, I would understand they need jobs. They need to earn some money when they're still in their 20s, and so I would have developed industries. So with those things, I would have done a better job in bringing up the economy of the country, protecting the environment of the country, but also looking after the family unit. I'm to be very frank with you, at times I feel very sad that people didn't vote for me, because I would have never allowed people to suffer this way.
Your vision is inspirational and you talk a lot of sense. But in Sri Lankan culture, the way is that you go to provincial council, you go to divisional council, and maybe with your family backup, you become a member of parliament. But having said that, you haven't been in any of these places. How many votes did you expect that you would get?
I actually got 27,575. I came fourth in 5 districts. So I spent only about 3 million rupees for my election campaign. And I think with spending so little money and never saying a lie, always believing in saying the truthful thing, because I always wanted to say things that I know I could achieve. And that was very, very important. No corruption. and and based on those, and I'm very happy with the votes that people gave. And I think today those 27,575 people should be thanked by the people of Sri Lanka because of their encouragement only that I'm raising my voices today and ensuring that all these difficult things that people are going through to be solved. So I think people should thank those people who voted for me. They are the ones who gave me the encouragement.
How many did you expect?
I knew right at the beginning I was not sure, but as time went on, I saw that Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa and both Sajith and Anurukumara, they were using a tactic whereby they were actually feeding the people. They gave them food passes, they gave them bottles to drink, they gave them all sorts of things, and they brought busloads of people in order to show the people in the country that they were very powerful. And using those tactics and then using the media a lot, because media also media plays a very strange role during the elections. This is something that I spoke with the election commissioner, because unless you have money, you cannot have advertisements in the media. Unless you have money, you can't go for talk shows. Unless you have money, you don't get invited for many of the media, the stuff that they have during election time. So you are literally cornered and pushed aside. And with that, I felt, there was a very little chance of getting the votes, because those other people were spending large amounts of money and they were being given so much of preference because of that. So I knew towards the latter part, it was a hard fight. But nevertheless, I didn't want to give up. I was the only woman. And I think on behalf of the women of Sri Lanka, and with the responsibility that I was given through that, I wanted to stay on.
And just because you were a woman in that contest, have you faced any special discrimination?
Only at the elections office. When I went actually to say that I'm going to be contesting, there were two comments that were made, which I didn't like, the election commission. One of the comments was, they said you come to, there are the percentage of women in Sri Lanka is 56%, and they said, you're trying to capture the women's votes, and whom are you going to give it to? So they never expected the fact that I am able to be a president of a country, that I'm capable of being the president of Sri Lanka, and that I'm able to run the president's office for a prosperous nation. They never believed that. The elections office, not anywhere else. The second comment that I got was that I wanted to put my doctor, because I was the only person in the whole campaign who had an honest doctorate. The rest they called themselves doctor, but they were given those. There was only one other professor, and he was Professor Vijay Singh, I think, and he was good. But apart from him, I was the only person who had a genuine doctorate. And then I asked the person there whether I could include that, because it would mean something to me. It's something that I treasure because I'm educated. And he looked at me and he said to me, do you have DR in your birth certificate? So I felt like being insulted by that. I am saying these things because I don't want another woman to go through this in the next time they want to contest for a presidential election. The third thing they did was the last thing. I saw it very clearly. They told me you managed to come for the elections because you only had to pay 50,000 rupees as a deposit, and they increased it to 3 million. And they said, okay, with 3 million, people like you all won't be able to come. So I think this is not the way for an elections office to be speaking to the first female candidate coming after 20 years.
Okay, so if you're still given some opportunity to become a minister in Sri Lankan cabinet, what would you choose? Minister of Women's Affairs, Minister of Environment?
Definitely Minister for Environment.
Okay, now this question will be a little bit personal also, just because we are women. In terms of your personal experience, haven't you ever faced any kind of a mental, physical, or sexual harassment in Sri Lanka?
The kind of discrimination that you're talking about came to me at the University of Colombo when I was working as a senior lecturer. And during that time, because of the garbage crisis that was happening in Sri Lanka, I decided to go to the garbage dumps and work on these, the various issues, environmental issues, in order to find a solution. That was eventually the recycling. But during that time, the people who were hierarchical, the head of the department, or people who are very closely linked to the head of the department, there was also a lady. They harassed me to a large extent. I still remember 2 occasions. I had to drop my child to Royal College in order for me to, in the morning, drop my child to school and then come back to the university, which is just next door. But they knew exactly that I would be there at 8 o'clock or between 7:30 and 8. And they would put all our meetings around that time, so that I would not be able to attend any of those. And they knew very well that I would be going to put my child to school. Second thing they did was, I was pregnant with my second child, and they never gave me the key to the toilet, and I had to sometimes even use the students' toilet. So I was harassed to the brain. And I think this is a mental agony that they try to put you through so that you would leave. But I'm so happy today that I managed to stay on for as long as I can, and I developed the national program on recycling of solid waste. I developed a new word in Sinhala language for recycling called Pratichakrikarana, and up to today that's a word that is known in Sri Lanka, and the children are benefiting from it. So what I feel is, discrimination for women come in different forms, and it can also come from women. But the important thing in all these things, and I would tell the younger people, is face it, get harder, and remember, whatever you go through, it's a lesson for your life. It makes you harder and you learn a lot.
This discrimination is in different fields and different levels also. So you being an educated and with a good personality, you got harassed in this level. But let's think about an average Sri Lankan woman who are vulnerable in such situations. Do you think that our laws and regulations are strong enough to protect all women against this discrimination?
No, absolutely not. The reason being, if you really look at the Sri Lanka, for example, number one, I am the first female presidential candidate after 20 years. See the amount of pressure there has been for 20 years for a woman to stand up for presidency. That's number one. Second thing, in many of the hierarchical positions in Sri Lanka, how many women have the opportunity to get there? Most of them are there because of their links. Very small percentage because of their qualifications, right? And even if you look at the women in the parliament, many of them have links to their families. And it's wonderful to see a woman who can go through from grassroots level right to the top without having any connections. So these things are still very rare. And the other thing that you find is, we do not even have a ministry for women's affairs. How often have we told the president that he needs to give that? Because with that, most of the women would be able to solve their problems, in the ministry itself. But it's never been. And then another thing is, there are women who go through abuse. There is also a tremendous amount of child abuse, and most of those cases are not heard. There are, people say that your cases should be solved very quickly, and there are about 50 to 40,000 cases still pending for children and women. Now, in the meantime, there are people who have killed someone, there are people who have robbed something, but they are given freedom. and their cases are heard very quickly. People who are linked to the president, you know, their cases are heard and they are set free. But a child who's been abused, their case is not yet heard. That's a huge amount of discrimination. So my hope is that during this difficult time, right now we are thinking of how a new government to be formed, how a new system is to be formed. Women's Affairs Ministry has to be set in place together with the Children's Ministry.
With that, we are going to wrap up things. Before that, we thank you again for joining with us today. And it was a wonderful discussion we had with you, and it gave us a lot of energy and a lot of hope. So stay tuned for another 20 Q&A program. We'll be back with you soon.